If you're looking for an adjustable set of coilovers for your non-MagneRide 2015 and newer Mustang that will deliver one of the most comfortable rides in the category, then you might want to check out the ISC street comfort options that I'm talking about here today. Now, the ISC coils will give you the ability to drop the car anywhere from 1 to 3 inches overall. Will also be 32-way adjustable on those dampers, and last but not least, can be had right here on the site for right around $1,000. And the install, according to the site, will get a full 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter here, about 4 hours or so to complete from start to finish. But if you hang till the end of the video, we'll show you how it's done. So for those who haven't heard of ISC, they are a relative new kid on the block in the land of both coilovers and suspension in general, but have really started to gain some notoriety here in the Mustang world thanks to their quality components and wide variety of offerings. They are based up in the Northeast and have a lot of employees who take part in different styles of motorsports, such as road racing and drifting, so they support what they sell and they are very knowledgeable of it. Hey, let's take a closer look at the Street Comfort coilovers, one of 3 different options, by the way, from ISC for your S550, the others being the Street Sport, and then last but not least, their track or race option for all-out performance. And I think you'll find the big difference between the 3 different options will boil down to not only the valving of the dampers themselves, but also the spring rates. For instance, the Street Comfort coils here will be the least aggressive of the 3, as you would imagine, and therefore will be for those Mustang owners who value a comfortable ride in addition to very nice ride quality over all-out handling performance. Now, exact spring rates for the Street Comforts include a 504 pounder for the front, in addition to a 784-pound rear spring riding on those mono tube dampers, which again are going to be 32-way adjustable, and basically that's going to allow you guys to custom tailor your ride quality depending on your personal preferences. The Street Comforts will also include pillow ball mounts in addition to your caster camber plates up top here, and everything is fully rebuildable, and they do offer a 5-year limited warranty in case you happen to run into any issues over the years. Finally, guys, they do include things like your adjustable collar or spanner wrenches here to help you make adjustments to the coilovers themselves, in addition to hardware and everything needed to get installed. And if I could just say, a lot of times, guys, as I see a lot of products come through here, a lot of more budget-friendly stuff, and despite this being maybe a little lesser known or a little bit more budget-friendly, the quality of construction is certainly on point, and I would not hesitate to run these things on my personal S550 if I was looking for something that's going to be a little bit more comfortable. But anyway, enough about that. What do you say we talk about the drop again here with the ISC Street Comforts? And again, 1 to 3 inch range will essentially allow you to go anywhere from a mild drop to a wild or slam drop, basically being undrivable depending on how low you'd like to go. But to give you a better idea of how the coilovers are going to go on, in addition to how they're going to look once installed, here's that detailed walkthrough we promised you, in addition to a tool breakdown.
Tools required for this installation: 1/2-inch impact with lug socket, universal swivel, various extensions, 3/8 impact, sockets ranging from 13mm up to 24, standard socket wrenches, breaker bar, pry bar, a nice ball peen hammer, 5 and 6mm Allen keys, the supplied spanners, and wrenches ranging from 12mm up to 19. All right, our first step is to pop the hood and then get the car in the air. We're gonna leave the hood open for this install. All right, we're gonna remove the wheel now. All right, so now we're at the top of the strut tower. We are going to loosen all 3 nuts and remove 2 of them. We're gonna keep one of them hand tight. And this is a 15mm socket up here. So I'm gonna leave this one right here because it is gonna be the closest to reach while putting that new coilover in. We're going to set these off to the side. We will not reuse them as the new coilover kit comes with nuts for the top. All right, now we're going to be removing our sway bar end link with a 17mm wrench on the backside just to hold that stud. Now we are going to use an 18 deep well. And remove that nut. All right, what we're going to do now is remove the whole caliper bracket. That is on by two 15mm bolts. There's one here, and then there's one at the bottom as well. All right, be ready to move your whole caliper and bracket over to the frame rail right here, or the K-member. That way there's no stress on this brake line. And it's just gonna remain there until we're ready to swap the coil over. And now you can just pull your rotor off. And you're gonna have that much less weight that you have to worry about. Then we have easy access to our spindle nuts holding on that stock strut. All right, now we are going to remove our wheel speed sensors from our stock strut right there. There's one there, and then there's one on the bottom. They're both Christmas tree style. You can grab them like this, or you can grab a push pin removal tool and just working it out. And that way we're gonna have some room when this spindle does drop down. All right, now let's tackle these nuts right here. All right, now I have a 24mm socket. We are going to take these nuts. We're not gonna remove them all the way. I'll show you what we are gonna do with them now. We're gonna bring them down to right around there. So when we need to tap this out because they are press fit in there. So what we're actually gonna do is we're gonna take a hammer and just tap them out of there. You can see the splines right there. Now when we go to reinstall it, we're just gonna find those splines and then run that nut back down, and this will come through. All right, as you can see, we're gonna have that little play. Now we can remove those nuts. All right, so what we're gonna do now is remove these bolts. And I'm gonna use my body and my other hand because this spindle is gonna wanna drop down. So we're gonna control its fall like that. Now what we gotta do now is get this sway bar end link through that, and then while reaching up top, that nut, that third nut that you have hand tight, we are going to remove that and remove our coil over and remove our strut and take it to the bench. All right, so now we're gonna be removing the lower nut for the sway bar end link. Again, 18mm socket and a 17 to hold this. All right, our kit does come with new sway bar end links, so we are going to put this to the side. All right, moving on to the rear, we're going to remove the tire. All right, before we get underneath the vehicle, we have to remove this 13mm bolt holding our brake line bracket and these two 19mm bolts holding the top of our shock. Let that just hang there. Now these are 19s. All right, set these to the side. You will reuse those. All right, now I'm going to remove the two bolts holding the bottom of the stock shock out. Now hold on to these. You will reuse these. All right, now I'm going to slide our shock out of the way and put this to the side as we need to take this top mount off. All right, now I removed the bracket from my brake line and the shock from the other side. Now what I'm going to do is use a 13mm socket and loosen but not remove these. And what these are for is this subframe bracket. We have to lower the subframe in order to get our stock spring out. So I'm just going to keep them right about there. Now we're going to use a 21mm socket and lower the subframe. All right, so we have the vehicle's subframe supported by 2 pull jacks. Now we're going to loosen, but not remove, this 21mm bolt. All right, we'll keep it there. Again, this is just hand tight. Now we're gonna move backwards, make sure that I have some support there. And we are going to remove this rear subframe bolt. You can actually see the subframe coming down a little bit. I'm going to make sure that it is supported on both sides. Continue to loosen this. I'm going to keep this to the side. Now watch what happens when I lower the pull jack. Watch this gap here. Now this spring, you may have to pull down on your lower control arm in order to get it out of this pocket. We're gonna attempt to do it now without a pry bar. All right, so I'm going to bring this pull jack back up a little bit more and actually remove just one of these front lower subframe mounts just to get a little more travel, get that spring out. So with that removed, I'm going to, again, lower this subframe carefully. It is still very well supported on the other side. And what that should do is give us that needed space to turn this out of here. I'm going to use a pry bar, put it on the inside of this lower control arm, and use it as a lever. Just lift your stock spring out of the way. It's okay that our upper isolator fell out. We will not reuse that. All right, so now that we have our stock strut assembly and our new coilover on the table, you can see some of the major differences, how wide and spaced out these springs are, how tight and compact this is. Now this kit does offer up to a 3-inch drop in the front and rear. I don't want to go down that low, so we are actually going to raise this coilover up a little bit. Now ISC does hook you up with some new spanner wrenches, so we're going to break this collar right here, bring this down, and then also loosen up this one, because we should be able to gain some distance right here. So that's about a 1/2 inch that I just gained. I'm gonna go a little bit more. I'm gonna go a little bit more to about there. And now, comparing the two next to each other, I'm just going where these bolt holes go off. That's about a 2-inch drop right there, I'd say. So we're gonna lock that in and do that on the rear as well. But we're working in the front right now, so we're just gonna lock this down. Lock that back up. Now, another important thing to note is the orientation of your top hat and the bottom of the strut here. So you can see that it's a little canted to this side. We're gonna do the same on our new coilover. So again, there's just that slight little turn there. And tighten that up. All right. We're also going to tighten up this bottom collar. All right, now let's get this in the car. All right, so this is our stock sway bar end link, and this is our ISC sway bar end link. This one is totally adjustable with the jam nuts right there. So what I'm going to do is open it up just a little bit. Again, we're only going to be doing about a 2-inch drop in the front. So that looks about right. I'm not going to lock this down because we are going to be able to adjust it while it's on the vehicle. So let's get everything onto the front of this vehicle. All right, so I removed the 3 top nuts on this, and I am going to slip it into place. And then on top, I'm going to attach, just hand tight, our nuts onto the 3 studs. Right. All right, now grab one of your 24mm bolts. And again, we are going to move the spindle into place, slip it onto our coilover, and run that through. Now the reason why I did the top is when that coilover comes in, it'll be really nice and easy for me to get that bottom bolt in. All right, now what I'm gonna do now is just attach our sway bar end link. I'm not gonna tighten this down just yet. It will require an Allen key. I'm just going to put it in place. Start the top nut now. All right, now we're gonna be tightening down our sway bar end link. This nut is a 19 millimeter and the Allen key right there is a 6. So what I'm gonna do is just hold it with the Allen key and tighten down my 19 millimeter nut. Do this for the top and bottom. It gets a little hard. Move your wrench like that. That way you can get a little more leverage on it. All right, now once that's tight, we're gonna tighten this bottom one. All right, now once you have your bottom and top sway bar end link nut secured, we are going to tighten down our jam nuts right here. Now you can get some final adjustability. As you can see, these are loose. If you take a 12 millimeter wrench, you can move this up or down. And you can actually see the sway bar moving up with it. All right, so we are going to use a 14 millimeter wrench. And we are going to tighten down on this top one. And now we are going to tighten the lower one as well. All right, now you're good to go. All right, next step, we're gonna put our 24 millimeter nuts back on our lower spindle mount. And then I'm gonna take my hammer again and just give it a little love tap right here, just to seat those splines back in where they need to be. And do that top and bottom. You don't have to go crazy. I'm using an air impact. You can use a regular impact or a regular socket. This is gonna drive this in, watch. Just like that, we're gonna do that top and bottom. All right, now we're gonna reinstall our rotor and caliper. And now we're gonna slide our caliper on. All right, and grab your two 15 millimeter bolts. I'm getting behind it so I can find where this belongs. The top, and there's the bottom. All right, now using a 15 millimeter socket and my air ratchet, I'm going to tighten this back up. All right, now we are going to reconnect our wheel speed sensor. You can go the top this way, or you can go on the bottom. I'm going to use the top. And remember, there's another one that attaches to the lower coilover right there. All right, now lastly, we're going to tighten up our 3 top nuts. All right, all the steps you just saw, we're gonna repeat on the passenger side, and then we're gonna go to the rear. All right, so we have our stock spring and our new spring on the table. I'm just gonna flip this upside down so it's flat. You can see the size comparison right off the bat. What we're gonna do is separate this new isolator, and we're gonna loosen up this Allen key, which acts as a little bit of a lock nut. So we're gonna loosen that up and slide our collar down, because again, this is a daily driver car. We don't wanna have it slammed to the ground. So I'm gonna leave about an inch and a half there, and I'm gonna do that on the other spring as well. So So right there, that's not too bad of a difference. It's probably about an inch, inch and a half. Again, this kit offers up to a 3-inch drop. We don't want to go down that low. Now that you have your spring where you want it, we are going to tighten down on that Allen key again. A little torque on there. That's a 5mm Allen key as well. So now we are ready to move on to our shocks, and we have to move a couple parts over from our stock shock to our new shock. All right, so we have our stock shock and our new shock on the table. We do have to move this mounting point over to this. So what we're gonna do is just pop the top off. And then we are going to use, I believe this is a 15mm socket, and we are going to take this off. All right, set that to the side. Thread that back on. We gotta change sockets over to a 18. So there is going to be a little bit of play. Once you get it up to the car, you can get it where you need it to be. Now there is one adjustment on this. As you can see, you have another collar there. And this needs to come up just a little bit, so let's do that now. Again, we're only dropping the car about 1.5 inches, so we only need our shock about 1.5 inches lower than where we're at now. All right, now let me get my spanner wrench and lock that down. All right. Now we can get our final lockdown once it's installed in the car and not moving anywhere. So let's get all these new parts installed in the car. All right, now we're gonna drop our new spring in. Carefully get behind that axle and drop it into your pocket here. Make sure it's oriented correctly on that bottom isolator, just like that. And we're gonna slide it in. And now we're ready to just jack up on our subframe a little bit, just to keep that seated in that pocket. All right, we're gonna install the other side now and work on our shocks as well. All right, now I have the other side in. I'm gonna start jacking up on this side. Again, getting that subframe back into place. Make sure you hand start these. It is your body mount for your subframe, so you don't want to strip that out and you don't want to cross thread that. So I'm going to get that as tight as I can. Again, really just make these hand tight as much as you can, and then put a socket on it. Don't use your impact. All right, so I have a 21mm on my 1/2-inch drive. I'm just gonna tighten these down. I'm gonna go evenly all the way around, just to make sure my subframe is lined up the way it came from the factory. I'm just going all around, making sure that these are even. All right, you can see that spring is seated in there very nice. We're gonna work on our shock now. All right, now we're gonna install our new shock. I had to go out to the hardware store and pick up some new bolts for this. They are just M10 1.25 pitch. Now I got the longer ones because you do have to feed it through the shock mount itself and the lower and part of the lower control arm. All right. Now on the bottom, I'm going to put a flat washer and lock washer. All right, now we're gonna tighten these down, and then I have the pull jack here because that will enable me to push up on the lower control arm to get those 2 top bolts in. All right, now I'm gonna tighten up these new shock bolts. I have a 17 on the top and an 18 on the bottom. All right, so what I'm doing now is I'm pushing up on this pull jack. If you're on the ground, you can use a floor jack. And I'm just getting those bolt holes as close as I can. And I'm gonna start my upper shock bolts. There's 1 and 2. Again, this is a 19 millimeter. So remember to tighten that back down. Once you do that, you can put your 12 millimeter back on your brake line bracket and you're good to go. All right, 19 mil. All right, you don't want to go crazy because you don't want to strip out the nut on the inside of that. All right, so I have my 13 millimeter bolt. I'm going to start that for our brake line bracket. Now you can release the tension on your shock and new spring. Take your pull jack out, put your wheel back on, and you're good to go. All right, that's gonna wrap up my install of this ISC Sport Comfort Coilover Kit. And for all things Mustang, keep it here at AmericanMuscle.com.